If you're a binge eater or you binge and purge in some way, or maybe you love someone who struggles with this, I wanted to share my story in hopes that it would help you. My name is Debbie Thompson, and I help busy, high-achieving women over 40 to lose weight for the last time so you can be free from carrying the burden of the shame and overwhelm of these weight struggles and feel confident and strong and beautiful as you age. If that sounds like what you need, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be notified when I post a new video every week. Okay, so I started binging back in the 80s when I was a teenager, and at that time there was no word for it, at least that I had ever heard of. All I knew is that suddenly I was hormonal and I was emotional, and it was sort of pleasant and nice to eat a lot of mac and cheese or Pop-Tarts or fast food. And now I know that that was giving me serotonin and dopamine, but I, saw no connection, no correlation. I was just following whatever came to mind. And at first it seemed very harmless because I wasn't hurting anybody. I wasn't becoming an alcoholic. I wasn't doing drugs. All I was doing was eating. And at first I didn't even see any difference in my weight. So it really didn't, concern me at all. But that didn't last super long. I'm short. It didn't take long before I did start to put on weight, feel uncomfortable. I'm growing out of my clothes. So then I started taking extreme measures because, of course, especially I think back then, all you did was go on these crash diet programs. I remember doing things like a liver diet with a friend, and there was grapefruit diets, and there was just eat once a day or eat nothing or eat celery or, cut back to 1,000 calories. So I would just, realize that I had eaten a ton of mac and cheese or fast food. And then, okay, that's the end of that. We're eating nothing tomorrow. We're going to skip the whole day or maybe eat one meal a day. And, it just was those extremes. So I again now know that this is very common. Nobody was saying this back then, but from what I have learned since, extreme restrictive dieting is one of the leading causes of developing binge eating disorders or any eating disorders. So that really did just completely put me on this cycle of one extreme or the other. I also tried laxatives eventually, and I had heard of people starting to make themselves throw up after they had eaten, even if they didn't binge, just, eat and get rid of it. And I just thought that was the most brilliant way to cheat the system and get to have your cake and eat it too. No pun intended. So I could make myself throw up though, and that really actually bummed me out a lot. But, I did try the laxatives, didn't like that very much, and basically I just settled into these extreme try to deprive and then completely overeat. And what developed for me was just the most overpowering, out of control, addictive feeling for food in general. It wasn't just about emotions all the time. A lot of the times it was just that, if I would go over to somebody's house and they had a meal, I would literally start to feel anxious and scared because the entire family that I was with ate their meal and got up and went about their day and appeared to feel fine and satisfied. But I felt literally still like I was starving, and I had to figure out how to get more food because I could not calm down. I was so agitated, and maybe I was at a sleepover at a friend's house, and I couldn't figure out, I'm not in my own house. I'm not going to go raid their, cabinets during the night like I would have done at my own house. So I would either be making up excuses maybe to get my friend and I to go out and get something to eat, or, I'd try to hint, do you feel like having some snacks later on or something? Sometimes I would know that this was going to happen, so before I would go to a friend's house, I would binge to be sure that that hunger subsided enough that I also could eat with their family and not have this starving feeling afterwards. So then I got to college and I was continuing this, and my weight is just creeping up and up and up because the extremes don't work, and I'm wrecking my metabolism. And I heard that if you exercise 20 minutes after you eat, that burns all the calories off. Jackpot, I thought. This is perfect. It's sort of like the people that were making themselves throw up. I could now beat the system too. So I remember being in the cafeteria at college and just eating. Like I said, it did not even have to be anything extreme. You just get rid of what you eat. So I eat my meal, and I would literally get up from the table while everybody else is still sitting there. I'd be watching my watch and making sure that, maybe 15 minutes after I ate, that I got up from that table and I bolted out of there to go to exercise all of those calories off. And I tried that for a while. The problem with that system is you might lose motivation to work out. So there goes that, solution. So again, there was no word for that. I did learn later that this was a thing that other people did and that it was termed exercise bulimia. But at the time, all I knew is I wasn't making myself throw up, which by, a couple years after high school, I did hear that there was this thing called bulimia, but I knew I didn't have it. So this continued all through college, and the fall after graduating from college, this was 1986, I remember seeing a TV movie about a bulimic woman, and it starred Meredith Baxter Birney of Family Ties, and I was completely engrossed in this movie. I remember sitting there, I remember where I was sitting, I remember the whole environment, and during the course of this movie, when something emotional would happen to her, I remember physically feeling the way I'm guessing they were having her feel before she would binge. And so I'm physically, taking on those emotions and that tension, and I know what's coming. She's going to binge. Well, she did. That's what, would happen throughout the movie. But she also purged. She would make herself throw up, which as I said, up to that point, I never had done, and I did not think that what I was doing had anything to do with bulimia. I just thought I couldn't stay on a diet. So while watching this movie and sort of having my mind blown, and I remember even going to bed that night after the movie and being like, wow, I have a thing. It is not just that I have no willpower. It is not just that I have some horrible addiction to food. It is not that food has some magical power over me that it doesn't have over other people. It is not that I love food too much. It's that I have a thing. And apparently people get this thing, and they do this thing with food, and I can stop doing it. And I also have to make a little aside here because this fascinates me so much. I heard Glennon Doyle either talking or writing about her story of becoming a bulimic, and I believe that she was watching the exact same movie based on how she described it and the time frame and how her age, she's younger than I am, and the age that she said she started her bulimia. So it's really crazy and scary how anyone, any one of us, we're all unique, can develop or be healed by the exact same thing. So I just want to put that in here so that you don't feel any kind of shame if my story is not giving you a light bulb yet. I hope it will. But if you're not feeling like the relief maybe just by me explaining to you that I felt all the light bulbs go off by watching this movie, there's nothing wrong with you. So let me get back to the rest of the story. Okay, so after that time in 1986, watching that movie and having all the bells and the ahas go off, I really never binged again. This is not to say that I didn't overeat anymore. But in general, what I did is what now is considered intuitive eating. I just sort of realized that I was paying attention to, I'm eating, I'm getting full, I stop. And that whenever I was emotional about something, that movie had made such an impression on me, and I knew that it was just a false thing in my mind calling me to eat, and that eating had nothing to do with my emotions I was having. So I just didn't do it. I would feel the feelings and I would just deal with the feelings. So finally, I want to sum up the lessons that even though my specific healing might have come from and been triggered by different solutions than you would have right now, there are definitely clues to success that you can apply and that you can start to reflect on how this would work for you. So clue number 1 is that food lost its forbidden fruit appeal. Okay, so when I realized that my binging was a thing and that it had nothing to do with dieting, and I just sort of allowed myself to eat and did what I said now I realize was basically intuitive eating and mindful eating, I just ate when I was hungry and I was able to stop when I was full. The second clue was that food lost its mystical, mythic power. It was sort of like in The Wizard of Oz when the curtain is pulled back and you see that this great and powerful voice really was not real. There was this little man behind the curtain, and that voice wasn't even his. So I started to see food very differently after that. Instead of it really being this manna from heaven, it was really just something that I realized I was using wrong and that I was using to extremes so that was perpetuating itself. And then clue number 3, as I alluded to before, I stopped using food for emotional eating. Now, that can be easier said than done. But again, for me, when I realized that this wasn't legitimate, this wasn't like, logically I'm turning to food to help me because it does help. Really, food has nothing to do with emotions. Okay, we do see that, yes, it can give us serotonin and dopamine. And there could be deep-seated reasons in you that food was used a certain way as you were growing up, and your body, your mind, and your spirit are still associating it with soothing or with reward. However, again, that is programming. That's not real. It would be the same as us saying that the person that turns to cigarettes, gambling, sex, drugs, or any other shopping or any other addiction, that thing really does solve their problem. It doesn't solve their problem. It numbs their problem, but it doesn't solve it, and neither does food. This again sort of fast forwarded to a concept that no one talked about around me anyway in the 1980s, and that was mindfulness, creating space between the trigger and the response, creating space between thought, feeling, action, realizing that I could stop at the trigger, at the event, and think, all right, nothing in me wants to go back to the prison that I was in when I used to binge over these events. So I'm allowing this to just be what it is. This is an event. I don't like it, but I am not going to associate it with soothing myself with food and putting myself back in that prison again. Which also ties to the power and the reality of neuroplasticity. And that concept was not around in the 1980s. In the 1990s, it was discovered that our brains can continue to change and learn throughout our entire lives. It used to be believed that we sort of could change when we were younger, but by the time you're old, that saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, was just what was believed. And researchers found out that our brains are plastic and they can continue to change and mold and grow, and old habits and old neural pathways can die out and new neural pathways can be formed throughout your entire life. So what was happening for me when I have my initial aha and I continue to practice the new thought and the new choices and the new actions, my old neural network just completely got disconnected, and new pathways and new thoughts and new habits and new, triggering actions came about instead, that I do not even think of doing the binging anymore. I want to leave you with 2 excellent books that I highly recommend, and it's really cool for me because these books have only been written probably within the last 10 years, but they echoed and confirmed to me what I experienced, the reality of that approach, and how it can work for you. One book is called Brain Over Binge, and that's by a woman named Katherine Hansen. And the other book is called The Little Book of Big Change, and that's by Dr. Amy Johnson. I'm going to put the links to both of those below. They use brain-based approaches and thought-based, reflection to help people heal from binge eating and other habits. And now I want to hear from you. What resonated here? What part could you relate to at all? And was there any little crack in maybe some thinking that you have bought into that maybe helps you see how you could be free? Could you use some help with this kind of holistic approach that's diet-free and that's much more life-affirming and empowering? I'm also putting a link below where you can schedule a free consultation call, and we can talk more about what you're struggling with and what my program is all about, and see if it could work for you. I also encourage you to watch these other videos where I talk about lots of other nuances of an empowering diet-free way to weight loss. Please share this video with other women because I know how many are struggling. Take care, stay well, and I'll see you in the next video.